Thank you for joining us on the Winning at Selling podcast. I'm Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute, and with me is Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems.
Each of us gets 24 hours in a day and 7 days each week. So how is it that some people get so much more done than others? Is it luck, planning, smarts, or something else? Scott and I are excited to welcome one of those people who get a lot done, and he's going to help us learn how daily execution results in extraordinary results. So put on your running shoes and pop in those earbuds as Scott and I welcome marathoner and development expert Scott Welle to episode 536 of the Winning at Selling podcast.
So I'm really looking forward to this conversation with Scott Welle. I've heard him speak many, many times. He always delivers new content, inspirational content, I think most importantly, and stuff that we can apply on a daily basis. But before we start that conversation, just an announcement, no book club today. We will be starting the book, The Theory of Accountability. So if you haven't picked that up by Sam Silverstein, please look that up and consider buying it and following along with Bill and I. So that will start next week.
Yeah, I have a feeling, Scott, that what Scott Welle is going to talk about is going to have a lot to do with accountability, personal accountability. So
if we adopt it, we could just kind of push snooze and go, hey, you know what? Tomorrow's going to be different. And, you know, the days are getting shorter, Eeyore. And we can have that mindset too. But it really has a lot to do with our commitment and mindset. And I'm really looking forward to that.
Well, let's hear what Scott has to say. So Scott Welle is a #1 international best-selling author, speaker, and founder of Outperform the Norm, a leading program for business leaders and athletes looking to raise their game and perform at the highest level. Scott's worked with professional athletes in the NFL, the Major League Baseball, PGA Tour, with elite level triathletes, CEOs, stay-at-home moms, and everyday heroes who've all had one common goal: to improve and be better today than they were yesterday. Scott has 9 best-selling books. He has articles, videos, podcasts, online programs that inspire hundreds of thousands of people worldwide. He has a master's degree in sports psychology and is an adjunct professor at St. Olaf University. Scott, welcome to the Winning at Selling podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, we're happy to have you on. I know you want to talk about daily execution and extraordinary results, but before we get on to that topic, tell us how you ended up in the world of training and speaking.
Boy, how much time do we have? I guess
as much time as you need.
I could go way back on this. To be honest with you, I just actually started out as more of a writer, where I started writing books. This would have been probably 6 or 7 years ago or so. And it was just once I kind of got over some of the mental barriers that we all have, some of which I'm sure we'll talk about today, but kind of the mental barriers of who the heck am I, who's going to want to read my book, you know, kind of so on and so forth, and actually started putting some words down on paper. And then the books got out there, and eventually a couple of people started asking, would you come in and speak to this group, this company, this team, this organization? And I just said, sure. And they said, what do you charge? And I said, what's your budget? you
as much as you'll pay me.
And I didn't necessarily set out, I think, to be a professional speaker and a trainer, but it was just something that I really developed a passion for, the ability to impact people and the ability to spread a message. And it's something that I've really taken seriously and tried to develop over the years. And it's something that I absolutely love doing now.
Well, you're very good at it. And I know that whenever we've worked with groups, they've really enjoyed listening to you speak.
I appreciate it. I'm fortunate to be able to do it.
You're definitely a product of the product. I've known you for many years. I'm always grateful when people get us confused, you know, the way we look and the content and everything.
It's the physical attributes, really, isn't it, Scott? You're so close to a marathoner.
And, I was going to say, and vice versa, Professor.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about this daily execution, extraordinary results. What does that mean, Scott?
Yeah, so that's actually based on my latest book, Daily Execution, Extraordinary Results, or what I just simply call DEAR as an acronym. What it really does is it goes into kind of 3 different things, and it doesn't just go into the psychology of how we really think about our goals and kind of the psychology of big aspirations and big ambitions. But then it also goes into how we can properly construct a strategy that's motivating and empowering, as well as the third part, the execution, or that daily execution that does lead to extraordinary results. So how do we create some of the habits and patterns and routines that, if we do those, will allow us to actually be able to accomplish our goals and be able to achieve extraordinary results?
It's really all about our habits, isn't it? About what we do on a daily basis. I think John Maxwell says your secret to your success is in your daily routine. Sounds similar to what your philosophy is.
100%. I think we vastly underestimate the small little things that we do every single day that, stacked up over time, end up having massive results. And this is where I don't necessarily subscribe to kind of the philosophy that massive action solves all problems. I think a lot of times with massive action also comes inconsistency. And if we're talking especially about sales professionals, I think one of the biggest things I see out there in the industry is performance inconsistency, where it's like, okay, I have a great month or a great quarter, but then inevitably the next month, the next quarter might not be so great.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times that happens because we get stuck in I'm either doing massive action or maybe I'm not doing it. And you're kind of riding this roller coaster. Whereas if we were to look at some of the little things that we do every single day and just really execute on those with excellence, I think that's what leads to extraordinary results sustained over a long period of time.
I like the word commitment, and be committed in your priorities and be consistently committed in your priorities. I think, you talk about the behavior of salespeople. I think it's the same thing with health and wellness. People go on binges to lose weight, and then they practice a certain routine, and then they kind of reach their goal, and then all of a sudden they revert back to old behaviors, and they end up, picking up that, and they call it the COVID-20 now. Well, let's blame it on COVID. Well, you still could have gone outside, and you still could have walked, you still could have done all of the exercises, in most cases, to be able to keep the weight down. But it's amazing how we get distracted. And I've really worked with, uncovering the priorities of salespeople. And when they focus on the priorities, it's the same thing that they do when salespeople are changing a prospect's behavior. It's not about the routine, it's about the outcome. And it seems like salespeople kind of lose focus of their own personal behavior about it's not what they do every day, it's what they get when they do what they do every day. What are some of the alignments that you see between how salespeople sell and change prospects' lives and how they interpret some of their own behaviors and beliefs to be able to maintain consistent behaviors?
Boy, I could go in a lot of different directions with that. I think one of the first fundamental philosophies that I believe in is people will always buy you before they will buy your product, idea, or service.
Yeah,
so I think how we just simply show up with people, and I think maybe this speaks to what you said before, just very basically taking care of yourself. I think also to be your best professionally, you have to be your best personally. So taking care of yourself on kind of that personal level, knowing that it'll impact kind of you on the professional level. I think sometimes we can get so skewed where it's okay, I'm just only going to focus on what I'm doing professionally now, at the absence of everything that's going on with me kind of on this other side. And I don't think that ever leads to good long-term kind of sustainable outcomes. And I think the only other thing that I'll say probably in regards to what you said is you use the word priorities a lot. And I find myself talking a lot about this lately because I think outperformers really at the end of the day, and people that succeed at a high level, they don't have a really lengthy to-do list.
Right.
What they have is a very limited strategic priorities list. And they found a way to pare that down and find a way to spend more time, not on just doing more stuff, because what we're really talking about is kind of the anti-busy. Right. They're not ones that are typically saying, oh, how are you doing? Oh, I'm just busy. Like busy, I have so much to do. They're actually thinking about how can I spend more time on the things that are really impactful, the things that really move the needle, and the priorities that make the biggest difference, either in my personal life or in my professional sales results.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about, well, I think there's a book, The One Thing, and focusing on, a narrow niche of priorities. But I'm working with a client right now that that they tend to work well below their level because it's a cultural value to pitch in when things are going, when things are busy. And so then people at a very high level tend to work in the factory instead of doing the things that are going to be very valuable for the company. How do we help people see that this priority, this value, doing the things that at the highest level I'm uniquely able to do is going to get me further than going and working in the factory for a couple of hours because it looks good to everyone else?
All the mental skills that I talk about, I oftentimes will just say they're just like muscles. I mean, sort of like the same way that you don't maybe get strong one time from just lifting weights once, or you don't get fast or fit from running one time, let's say. I don't think that you become maybe a confident person or develop self-belief from doing something one time. So I think if we're talking about maybe somebody that I will always just say self-limiting beliefs are the governor on our individual potential, just simply meaning that they're like a ceiling on what we do.
Yep.
We're never going to surpass in whatever self-imposed, self-limiting beliefs we have on what we're doing. And I think sometimes with people, to just get them to be able to lift a little bit of that governor and to be able to believe in kind of what they're doing and their ability to achieve extraordinary results. I think to be able to do that, you have to develop some competency in a specific area, or just simply said, you have to be able to get some small wins. And then ideally those small wins or that competence should kind of feed into your confidence and your self-belief, and kind of round and spiral upward we go. But I always try to get people to just simply focus a little bit more and actually internalize the small wins that you're getting every single day, because they really are the precursor to big wins. And if you only ever allow yourself to feel really good about what you're doing when you've hit your quota for the year or the quarter, or accomplished some monumental milestone or kind of breakthrough, you're missing a huge chunk of the pie. And if we can start to savor some of those small wins and build up some confidence about what we're actually capable of accomplishing, now all of a sudden we're on our path to be able to achieving our highest level and maximizing our potential.
The interesting thing is sometimes when we get those big wins, they're so much over our comfort zone or our expectations of what we thought we would do in a month or a year or a quarter or whatever that is, that we actually stop working because we hit that goal. And instead of pouring it on, as it were, now we've stopped because, wow, I couldn't believe I could have done that much.
So we're talking about you actually achieved the goal, so you get complacent afterwards?
Yeah, we hit the goal, which is bigger than we thought we would ever hit. And now we end up psychologically stopping our work because we can't believe we could go any further. Kind of that self-limiting that you talked about in another way.
There's always another level for all of us, and to be, I think, driven by that. And that's where, I'm sure you both see this all the time, right? Like sales can be a very, for lack of a better term, let's call it an ego-based profession. Depending on kind of how an organization or a culture is structured, it could be a lot of, we're going to give you a bonus if you're a top performer. You're competing against other salespeople. So I think naturally there could be that part of, okay, me against you. And I do believe competition, when it's framed the right way, can benefit all of us. But I think what we're talking about is, if you've already achieved or accomplished your goal, how do you continue to aspire to get better and to continue to work hard? And that's where I think when you look at people that are really not just high achieving and successful, but are also fulfilled while they're doing it, I think they're going a little bit more to the beat of their own drum. And they're thinking about, okay, I had a great month, I had a great quarter. Well, how can I get even a little bit better this month or this quarter? Like, what do I need to tweak in my process or in my presentations or how I'm going about doing things? And that not only keeps them engaged and keeps them interested, but keeps them growing regardless of what their results are, if that makes sense.
It seems like one of the mindsets that people might have, or kind of a reaction when they think about that, is they're asking themselves, what do I have to give up in order to get that? What more do I have to give up to get that? And I don't want to give anything up. I mean, loss aversion is probably one of the main motivation when it comes to making a decision, is people don't want to give up what they have. And when they want more, they have to ask themselves, what am I going to give up to get more? Do you find that to be a common mindset, or how do you deal with that in your head?
Yeah, what I call it is loss pain. So I assume we're talking about the same exact
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
It's like, well,
exactly.
I want the 6-pack abs, but I don't want to give up the beer and the pizza.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
and there is a pain, or there has to be a sacrifice, so there has to be something that must happen in any goal that we're working towards. Now, the interesting part with that is, as we're thinking through what we want and what we're going to do to be able to get it, we have to separate perception from reality, because
Mm-hmm.
perception of what we have to give up is not always the same as what we actually have to give up.
Mm.
And sometimes we can all be guilty of kind of running these narratives and just saying, well, okay, if I want to be the top salesperson, I'm never going to be able to see my family, or I'm never going to be able to do a happy hour with friends, or, we create kind of this narrative in our head of all these different things. And some of them may actually be true, but others may not actually be grounded in kind of reality, and grounded in, okay, no, this is actually what's required to be able to get that goal. So we have
Mm-hmm.
to balance those two things out. If we find that the loss pain or the loss aversion is actually grounded in reality, I think, as simply as I can state it, instead of focusing on the pain, we have to focus on the gain. So
Mm-hmm.
if we can look at, okay, if we're going to give up this, or if we're going to do that, well, and that's going to hurt a little bit, or it's going to cause us some type of pain when we're doing it, well, what does it look like on the other side? Is it ultimately worth it? Is the juice worth the squeeze?
Yeah,
At the end of
that's
the
good.
month, quarter, kind of, et cetera. So that's how I look at it, and that's what I try to emphasize. And psychologically, you have to be able to do that, because if all you're focused on is, well, I don't want to give up this really great thing, or I don't want to do this really hard thing, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't have something better on the other side to counterbalance that or
Right,
outweigh it, you're never going to act. You're
right,
never going to do the activity. It's just the truth.
right.
Yeah, sometimes it seems we have to throw ourselves over the bar first, because if we spend all of our time focused on what we're going to have to give up or sacrifice, which I think is a good word that you used, then we'll never get off the schneid, because we're going to use that as an excuse. Well, I'm not going to be the kind of person that'll never see my family, so therefore I won't aspire to be the greatest salesperson. And
Yeah.
instead of finding the right timing and doing the right thing, I'll use that as an excuse to not move forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, in regards to that, again, that's where we have to separate perception from reality.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, whether it's you or me or anyone else, we're all guilty of this. I would say, at the end of the day, we're all pretty distracted. If we really look at what we do every single day, it's just a simple thing like phones in our hyper connected world. Like, we can
Mm-hmm.
all always be doing a better job of single tasking and focusing on what we're doing. And to the point of kind of what you made before, if we're just going to sit back and say, well, I really don't want to act, I don't want to be the top salesperson, because that's going to mean that I'm never going to be able to see my family. Well, what if you actually just dialed in your focus and your commitment a little bit more during the time that you're actually working? And when you're on, you're on. And when you're off, you're off. And when you're working, you're working. When you're not working, you're not working.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really dial that in and do it with intentionality during those times, now I think, to a degree, you can actually have both, where you can achieve extraordinary results as a sales professional, and you can still have the balance of being able to see your family.
So if we really focused for that 40 or 50 hours a week and did the right things, then we'll have the time to see our family and still do well in our career.
Probably. I'd at least entertain the fact that that might be possible, rather than just saying, well, the only way to do this is I've got to work 80 hours a week,
Mm-hmm.
and not have the personal balance on the other side of it. I don't know. Every situation is unique, but I think, to be introspective and to really look at it and to say, okay, what is the time and energy that I'm putting into something? Just simply, how productive am I? Productivity defined is the rate of output per unit of input. And our inputs are always the same. They're our time and our energy. So I feel like lesser sales professionals will probably say things like, well, if I want to get better results, I just need to put in more time. Okay, well, you're increasing that time input, but really, if we look at that, the rate of output, that's not really increasing if our only method to be able to do that is I just need to hammer it with more time. It's actually thinking about how can I produce better results or get a greater output for the same amount of the inputs as far as the time and energy that I'm putting into it. It's just a better way to look at it, better questions to ask.
Well, I would think that's what sales training should be doing. It should be helping us then to get more productivity out of the time we're spending. If I have a better message to give, I should get a few more appointments out of the phone calls I'm making. If I'm better at discovery, I'll get a few more sales or proposals at least out of the meetings that I'm having. If I can incrementally increase in those 2 or 3 areas, then I'm going to get more productivity out of it. And so many times people think of sales training as some magic bullet that's going to change everything they do. And it's just incremental changes. Where can I get a little bit better?
That's the small wins I was talking about before. And that's the daily execution part of it. There is no magic pill for anything in life.
Rats. I wanted a magic pill.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the small changes over time that end up leading to those extraordinary results and the incremental improvements that we're making from something. It doesn't need to be a complete 180. It's just the small tweaks that end up leading to huge performance improvements.
I want to talk a little bit about sales quotas as opposed to our own internal goals, which we sometimes can believe easily, but a lot of times we have quotas thrown at us as salespeople. How can we handle that differently or merge that into our own personal goals so that we really get the same kind of energy from those that we get from something we set for ourselves?
So you're talking about if you've had no shared buy-in and if it's just a boss or manager or leader has basically thrown down this quota. And
that's what usually tends to happen, right? You did $1 million last year, so you should do 1.2 this year. No new tools, just throw it over the bar.
I get it. I've been there. So I talk a lot in my sales presentations about the difference between smart and dumb goals, as I call them. I'm sure you've heard of SMART goals, right? If we have goals that are specific, measurable, and action-oriented and realistic and timed, like we're all just going to live happily ever after in the goal achievement universe. And it's very logical. It's very left-brained. I'm not saying that it's wrong in any way, but it's what a lot of people will talk about in regards to goals. I actually have a special acronym that I created that I just call dumb goals, where I think our goals have to be dream driven, have to be unrealistic, have to be meaningful, and have to benefit others. And I think the psychology of, if you're talking about, I'm going to work towards this quota that was put down on me. Well, if we're looking at the dumb goals acronym, the dream driven part of it, how is this going to allow me to step into dream driven is just like vision, right? How's it going to further kind of my vision for my life and where I want to go as a sales professional? The unrealistic part of it may be a little bit tough if the quota is just thrown on you, but unrealistic is really just what is realistic and who determines or who decides that. And usually it's you. Right. This would be more of a conversation of what you determine or what you decide that you're capable of accomplishing or achieving. But I think sometimes we limit ourselves with just saying, well, we need to be realistic in what we're doing. I don't believe in that. The other two parts I think can be really impactful for working towards a quota. The meaningful part of it, if you accomplish this quota, why does it matter at the end of the day? Like, why is it really worthwhile? Why is it meaningful? Why would it be valuable to you, to your family, to your clients, to customers, kind of, et cetera, as well as the benefits others? Like, we will always, everything we know about accountability and social psychology and human behavior says that we will always play harder for others and for a team than we will for just ourselves. So focusing on when I'm selling this product, this program, this service, et cetera, How is that tangibly benefiting my customers, my clients, kind of the people around me, and tapping into some amount of that psychology if a goal or if a quota has just been kind of thrust upon you.
Mm-hmm. So internalize it and do what you can to make it your own goal through the dumb process of looking at how is it going to benefit me? How can I make it part of my dream and vision? Because it's still going to be out there, even if I maybe have trouble believing it.
Yeah, the internal part of it is what's going to keep you going and growing and getting better while you're doing. We can do what, quite honestly, most people do is let's just throw some external or extrinsic motivation at it through some kind of bonus or trip, or you get this if you end up achieving your quota, and it's fine. But again, that stuff is all well and good, but everything we know about human behaviors, if I give you a reward for doing something and it incentivizes your behavior, that's great in the short term. But what happens when I take that reward away? The behavior goes away. The motivation, the incentive goes away. So I think if we're looking at doing something, if we're really looking at having sustained excellence for the long term, we have to be able to tap into a little bit of our internal psychology and motivation of why we do what we do. And that's how we're going to perform at a really high level for a long period of time.
Mm-hmm. Great stuff, Scott. As we start to wrap up, there's two questions that I usually ask all of our guests that come on the show. And one of them is, who has had the greatest impression on you?
Probably my brother.
Okay.
Probably my brother. Yeah, a lot of people have heard stories about him in my speeches and otherwise. He's a Franciscan friar. I only have one sibling, so brother, a year and a half older. So
you have a brother who's a brother.
What's that?
You have a brother who's a brother.
He is a brother that's a brother, actually.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously, being with Franciscans, he's taken a vow of poverty. He's doing some amazing work, and I feel like in a lot of ways and in times when I've struggled personally or professionally, he's just been a really good sounding board, been a kind of a moral compass, I feel like, for me in a lot of ways, and helps me check myself when maybe I'm focused on the wrong things. And he's just been a tremendously impactful person in my life for a long period of time.
And it sounds like you've had an impression on him too. Didn't he run a marathon with you?
Yeah, we actually did Twin Cities Marathon. Yeah, that was our, I want to say 11th or 12th marathon that we did together. And
that's great.
Yeah, we set a PR for the Welle brothers. So it was a fun day.
Did you make him run it in his brown habit? with the belt of the bead belt and everything, right?
Yeah.
Thankfully, no.
And then I'm curious, what is your favorite sales book or sales author in the career of sales?
Well, I got started with Jeffrey Gitomer. I'm sure you're probably familiar with him. Little Red Book of Selling, Sales Bible, kind of, etc. I started there. Beyond that, I don't know that I mean, I always I subscribe to the philosophy that we're all in sales, right? Mm-hmm, so when I read a book, I say we're all selling something. I don't care whether your title is actually inside sales, outside sales, kind of, etc. So I think of some of the other books that have been very impactful on me. I mean, recent one was Atomic Habits by James Clear. I'm a big fan of that. Some of the other books that I've read, I guess, more around mindset and different things, like Relentless by Tim Grover, High Performance Habits by Brendan Burchard. Those are ones that I kind of think about initially. Yeah.
Great.
Have you found as you've worked with people, Scott, that and I know Scott Plum talks about this a lot, but the beliefs that we grew up with, right? The things that are deeply ingrained in us. You'd mentioned mindset. I grew up with a father who was a real Eeyore, great guy, but very pessimistic. And so I've spent my whole adult life tending to try to overcome these things. How do you in your books and in your work with people help them overcome these deep-seated beliefs that are getting in their way?
Sort of like we said before, there is no magic pill. There is no quick fix. I mean, I can't do any voodoo hypnosis. I can't.
No
I can't give you
microwaving.
anything. Yeah, I can't do anything that's going to flip that switch from I want to say roughly 70 to 80% of our personality is formed before the age of 8. So I talk a lot about kind of our belief systems and how they're established really early on, and they're hard things to be able to rewrite. But the way that you look at it is self-awareness is one of the greatest skills any of us can have in this lifetime. So just simply being self-aware of what is the story or what is the narrative that I'm telling myself about something. And so many people are completely out of touch with, this is the story I'm telling myself, and this is how it's by going through kind of a cycle of thoughts, of feelings, of behaviors, of results, is kind of feeding back into itself and is actually limiting what I'm doing. So being self-aware and just actually saying, no, this story isn't serving me to show up as my best. Once you have that part of it, now you can take an action to be able to change it. But most people are just not even aware of it at that point. And if it's something that's sort of like the mental muscles, if you can become a little bit more aware of it over time and continue to do it, it'll get better, and that belief system will start to rewrite itself.
Excellent. Thanks. Scott, any last thoughts from you?
No, I think that's a great quote that you just said, Scott. Self-aware is the greatest gift you can give yourself. And I just wish, I've heard about self-awareness being so important. And the first step of change is self-awareness. And if you don't have self-awareness, then you'll never change. And it's so true. And I just think our listeners need to really hear that a second time. So
I think that's
thanks for being on the show. Yeah.
I think that's what we get from reading.
Yeah.
Watching videos and stuff, we kind of learn things, but when we sit down with a book and read it, and I'm sure any of Scott's books can help you do this, but to sit down and read a book, you start to think about yourself and you put yourself in the place of that, how that author is talking, and it gives you the time to really do that self-reflection. And I do think that if you've stopped reading, you're not reading, you never were a reader, it'll be difficult to have that self-awareness that Scott Welle's talking about, because you just don't have that time to just sit and ponder. And that's one of the.
I always just say readers are leaders, learners are earners.
Yeah.
Truly believe that. I've seen it in every industry, and I'm not just saying you need to read my books or anything else, but that part, yes, of reading and leading, of learning and earning. I think we all need to do that.
Yeah, excellent. So, Scott, we're going to link to your website, scottwelle.com. Any other options or links that you want us to put in, things that we could give to our listeners that might be able to help them learn about you and continue this process?
Not really. I mean, everything's basically at scottwelle.com. Anybody can feel free to connect with me on social. I'm probably most active on LinkedIn, just at Scott Welle, but you can find me at Scott Welle anywhere. And just wish everybody all the best personally and professionally going forward.
Thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So our golden nugget today is, if you're not making progress, you don't know your numbers.
And Who said that? Who said that?
That's on page 65 of the book, Outperform the Norm by Scott Welle. So I encourage you to look at that book, and you can turn to page 65. If you're not making progress, you don't know your numbers, by Scott Welle. Great quote.
Yeah, I think, if we can't measure something, it's very difficult to understand our progress.
And we've talked about that more than once.
Well, that's when we put numbers to it, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, and that goes back to what Scott was talking about, I think we don't want to put numbers to it because we don't want to know what our progress is.
Right.
We purposely avoid that. So take a chance on yourself, put some numbers, set some goals, and see what happens. I think you'll be much happier.
So everything's at winningatselling.com. This is episode 536 with Scott Welle.
Next week, the book club will be starting The Theory of Accountability by Sam Silverstein, part 1, chapters 1 and 2. I think that's all of part 1.
It is.
And then we're going to talk about renegotiate or reframe, and that's about trading with price. Go out and get better one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.